Hello. Today I'm going to tell you a story, and it will be the story of the Greek goddess Persephone and how she became the queen of the underworld. So, it all started once upon a time. Um, the Greek goddess Persephone, she was the child of Demeter, who is the goddess of Earth's fertility and harvest, and also the daughter of Zeus, who is the king of all the Olympians. Demeter is known as the most nurturing goddess of all, and in turn, that made her a very nurturing mother. She was a very caring mother. And Persephone had a wonderful childhood. Um, she was able to play with all the other Olympian children, and she spent time in the gardens that her mother took care of. Um, so, as a child, she was beautiful and happy. And as she was playing in the gardens, she liked to pick flowers. And with her group of friends, the flora nymphs that she played with in the gardens, there was one time that suddenly the ground opened up. And who came out of the ground? But out of the deep darkness, Hades came out of the ground. Hades came out. He came out of his place in the underworld. And when he saw Persephone's beauty, he immediately wanted her. He envied her. He wanted to make her queen of the underworld. So, he approached Zeus and asked for permission to take Persephone as his queen. And as if you've heard any other Greek mythology, you might recall that Zeus very rarely thinks before he speaks, and on this occasion, it happens again. Zeus doesn't ask permission, he just says sure. So, with a little concern about how Demeter would respond with such a request, Zeus agreed and Hades was given consent. So, now Hades is given permission, so he takes Persephone and he carries her down. He carries her down to the underworld. And she cries out to her mother, like, help. But Demeter isn't able to hear her. So now she's in the underworld with Hades, and she's under Hades' control. So then, later on, Demeter comes down to the garden to come to Persephone. So she's expecting Persephone to be playing with the nymphs, but she doesn't find her daughter there. So she finds one nymph who's usually there with her daughter, and usually the nymph is happy with flowers in her hair, but this time she finds her sobbing, and her flowers are just laying strewn in the grass. Demeter goes to the nymph and asks her about Persephone, but the nymph just sobs and cries. So now Demeter knows something's wrong, so she is grief-stricken. So she searches all over the earth, looking for Persephone, trying to find her daughter, looking everywhere. And in her sorrow, in her grief, the earth starts to grow cold and dark because Demeter is not nurturing the earth like she usually does. She's worried and scared for her daughter. So the once beautiful earth is starting to wither and fade. The meadows are yellowing, their leaves are falling, they're fading, they're curling, and the rain has stopped. So, after she searched the whole land, well, she finally thinks, well, let me talk to Zeus. And he fesses up and tells her of Persephone's marriage to Hades in the underworld. And fair enough, Demeter's pretty angry. She is very angry at Zeus and demands that Zeus return Persephone to her care. But Zeus refuses at this moment. So, Demeter leaves Olympus and says, I'm not going to take care of the earth like I was before. I don't have my daughter. I am full of grief. And she's going to punish Zeus for betraying her and betraying Persephone. So, the grass continues to wither. Everything begins to decay more. It decomposes, turns to dust. Everything is falling apart. The whole world is no longer thriving. Zeus can't let his kingdom, all of everything he rules over, fall apart like this. So he finally gives in and says, okay, fine. We will get Persephone back. So he goes to Hermes, the messenger, and tells him to bring Persephone back up to Demeter's care. So now we'll switch back to the underworld. So in the underworld, Persephone had actually come to like Hades. She'd actually grown to love him once you get to know him. So he had treated her with compassion and loved her as his queen. So despite everything he'd done to steal her away, apparently he was a nice guy after all. So in the underworld, she stayed beautiful and young looking like she would have up in Olympus, but Hades was kind and took care of her, and he admired her kind and nurturing nature as well, along with her beauty. But Persephone still missed her mother and wished she could spend time with her. So when Hermes reached the underworld, he asked for Persephone to come back to the earth to join him and to come back to be with her mother and to her father Zeus. And Hades knew that he could not refuse Zeus's commands, so he said, okay, Persephone can go back, but he just could not part from his beautiful Persephone. He felt he could not say goodbye to her, so he hatched a bit of a scheme, and this is where our story takes a twist. Before she left the underworld to go back to Demeter and Zeus, he offered Persephone a pomegranate as a farewell. So, all of the Olympians knew that if you ate or drank anything in the underworld, you would be destined to remain there for eternity. And the fates cautioned this. So even Demeter had warned Persephone of this fate, and she instructed her to never eat or drink anything from the underworld. So, when Hades offered her this pomegranate, Persephone thought of her mother, and she decided, okay, I'm not gonna eat. I'll just take some seeds, just little small seeds. So, I don't think they'll count as consumption. So, little did she know that this was exactly why Hades had given her the pomegranate. She ate 6 of those seeds, and after eating 6 seeds, she was approached by the Fates, who told her she would remain in the underworld with Hades forever. So, Hermes had to go back to Zeus and Demeter. Oh, I have a kitty cat. And when he returned to Zeus and Demeter without Persephone, Demeter was distraught and spiraled into a great fit of grief and sobbing because she knew that Hades had tricked Persephone to stay down there. But Zeus, being the mighty god of all gods, the mighty king of all gods, he could not allow the earth to remain barren and decaying. So he went down to Hades himself, and he struck a deal. Because Hades had deceivingly tricked this young Persephone into eating the pomegranate, he commanded that Persephone would be allowed to visit Demeter for part of the year in the above domain on the earth. And in return, Zeus promised that for every seed that Persephone ate, she would spend a month in the underworld with Hades. So, for half of the year, Persephone spends in the underworld with Hades on the throne as the queen of the underworld. And for the other 6 months, she is on the earth with her mother in the land that is fertile and beautiful and warm, where the meadows are lush and beautiful and green. But when Persephone has to return to the underworld, the land returns to the dark and cold period where there's no growth because Demeter grieves for her daughter as she goes back to the underworld. And that's the end of the story. That's the explanation from Greek mythology of why the seasons are the way they are. Why autumn and winter are cold and gloomy with no growth, because Demeter is grieving Persephone being down in the underworld. And then why in spring and summer it's warm and bright and there's a lot of growth, because Demeter is happy and joyful and nurturing, because Persephone is out of the underworld and in her care. So, if you didn't know that before, I hope you know that now. That is the explanation of the seasons as told by Greek mythology. You all have a good day.